Hello, hello! Welcome to another episode of History in the Dark. I am your host, Darkness the Curse, and before we begin, as always, thank you so much to my generous patrons, my British rail critics, and of course, my underwater train finders, Thomas Ward, Lord Captain Von Thrust III, Some Dude 267, Longsight, Joshua Long, Ohio Trucker 1, Royal Hudson 2860, and Lord Hoth 444. You are the reason why this content remains well-maintained. And today we are going to discuss a story that I've actually touched on before, but I didn't make an exclusive video to it. Part of the reason for that is that I'm not the first person to discuss this, so it wasn't high on my list of priorities, when I know for a fact there's other content creators that have already made excellent videos on the subject, but it does kind of cross the streams when it comes to what I've been doing lately, namely preserved steam locomotive accidents and steam explosions. This one is both, so I feel like making a video on it isn't the worst idea in the world. This is the story of the Gettysburg Railway steam explosion. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania may be a location that's quite familiar to some history buffs, as it was the site of one of the most important battles of the American Civil War. Many people argue it was the turning point of the war, with the Union pushing back the Confederate Army. The South's defeat in that battle was something they would never recover from. And to this day, it's a popular tourist town for people who are interested in one of the most historical places in America. And let's be realistic in that regard, putting a heritage railway line in a place like that actually makes a lot of sense. But the passenger service was added on to an already existing freight service. The railroad actually used their diesel roster to ship freight to the local companies, and they interchanged with CSX and Conrail at the time. The tourist operation was a bit of a side project, but they had steam locomotives. At the time of the accident, they had two. Number 76 was a 280 steam locomotive manufactured by Baldwin, and number 1278 was a Canadian Pacific Railway locomotive, a 462 Pacific. It was a Class G5D, and it was acquired by the railway in 1987 when they traded their Canadian National Railway locomotive, number 3254. They also only had one diesel at the time, number 70, which was an Alco RS36. But the locomotive we really want to focus on is 1278, as it was the locomotive that suffered the failure. It was June 16th, 1995. 1278 was pulling a train of 6 passenger cars, and it already made two 16-mile round trips from Gettysburg to Biglerville, Pennsylvania. The 6 p.m. train was known as the dinner train. 310 passengers were on board for a round trip to Mount Holly Springs, Pennsylvania, where the passengers would have a catered 2-hour dinner in local restaurants before they returned to Gettysburg. Sounds like a nice experience, actually, but sadly that day things did not go well. The train left Gettysburg, and the co-owner and operator, who was also the engineer's wife, actually followed the train in a car. The purpose of her chase was to provide a contingency service to the train and, if necessary, limited emergency transportation. She had a cell phone and a two-way radio. The train crew also had two-way radios, and the engineer, her husband, also had a cell phone. This practice may not seem odd on the surface, but most heritage railways don't do this. If the locomotive is well maintained enough, you shouldn't need a mandatory chase vehicle, right? I don't mind a contingency, but it implies they might have thought something could go wrong. When they neared Aspers, Pennsylvania, which was milepost 15, also called the Wolf Pit, the train stopped and waited to receive a helper train in the form of the diesel locomotive. This would have to be the RS-36 that I mentioned before, number 70. Apparently this was standard procedure, and again, this isn't unheard of. Some heritage railways who don't want to overstress their steam locomotives will have a diesel on standby to provide pushing assistance. According to testimony given after the incident, a check valve, which is a one-way valve, between the feed pump and the boiler had been leaking all day. It was bad enough that apparently on a previous trip that day, when 1278 was running backward next to a double-tiered open-air observation passenger car, the spray from the leak necessitated people to move away from the first half of the car. According to the first fireman, as there were two, when the train left the Wolf Pit, the feed pump was shut off. According to him, this was normal, as there was a grade there, and the leak was putting water on the track and provoking wheel slip. As soon as they were moving again, they always turned it back on. The second fireman was to relieve the first fireman at Gardner's, and he said that when he took over, the feed pump was still turned off. At that point, he turned the feed pump, as he put it, all the way, and when both firemen were asked how they knew the feed pump was working, they both said that the sound and visual movement of the feed pump rod told them that the feed pump was working. As they had been trained, they felt such cues were sufficient to ensure that water was flowing into the boiler. Mind you, this isn't the case. A feed pump can continue to move with little or no water flow, and the safety board investigators agreed on this point. Generally, you don't go off the feed pump alone to ensure water's flowing. You would look at a gauge, or at least the water glass. Speaking of that, both firemen stated that they checked the water glass frequently during the trip, as they were supposed to. The first fireman said that he always did this, and the second fireman that he checked it once every 5 minutes at least. They also indicated that the engineer leaned back in his seat to check the glass about 3 times during the trip. During the testimony, neither the first nor second fireman felt that there was anything unusual about the level of the water in the glass that day. They said that it appeared to be normal, and it appeared to fluctuate about a half to a full inch. They felt the fluctuation was completely understandable considering the grade of the track and the vibrations going on in the locomotive. While they were still at Gardner, and the train was moving about 15 miles per hour, the firebox exploded. 1278 had suffered a very specific type of steam explosion, known as a backdraft explosion. It's a crown sheet failure, which you had to see coming. That's usually what it is. But in this instance, the explosion was back into the cab, not out and destroying the front part of the boiler. Superheated steam pumped into the cab, scalding the 3-man crew horribly. Allegedly, the crew did not bail immediately. They took the time to stop the locomotive and attempt to get the steam under control. They bailed when this didn't happen and suffered serious burns, and the engineer's wife, who'd been following, called 911. The first fireman had 2nd and 3rd degree burns over 10% of his body. His recovery would take about a month and a half. The second fireman had 2nd and 3rd degree burns on his legs, arms, and chest, and he had also managed to fracture his legs when he jumped through the locomotive cab window to escape. He was hospitalized for several weeks and had extensive therapy for his shoulders. The engineer, who had the most severe injuries, was airlifted to Crosier-Chester Medical Center, a hospital near Philadelphia that specializes in burn injuries. He had 3rd degree burns over 65% of his body, and he spent 6 months undergoing multiple surgeries and extensive therapy, and was still undergoing therapy and follow-up surgery 9 months later. Since this was a backdraft explosion and the locomotive didn't completely detonate, none of the passengers or other crew members were actually injured. It was contained to just the locomotive's cab. But what the heck happened? They said they were watching the water glass. It said that there was water in there. It's not a freight train, and they had help. There would have been no reason to run at low water. Well, the inspection of 1278 after the accident did reveal that, yes, crown sheet, like I said, but in this case, it had bulged downward in a bag shape and covered an area of about 60 of the crown stays. But as it turns out, the firebox was the only area that sustained major damage. 1278 was built a little bit differently from a typical steam locomotive, particularly involving the crown sheet. In accordance with Canadian Pacific policy, the crown stays were alternating rows of straight thread and button head crown stays. The first 5 rows of the rear tube sheet knuckle were straight thread, and that was followed by rows of button head. This design was very deliberate. If the boiler suffered a crown sheet failure, specifically because it wasn't covered by water, it would be pushed off the straight thread crown stays first. As a result of this, even though the crown sheet would buckle, it would be retained for a time by the buttonhead crown stays. The failure wouldn't happen instantly, it would occur progressively and in stages. The backdraft explosion was only the first symptom of a much more catastrophic failure. Because it happened this way, the locomotive didn't completely explode, injuring the passengers or people just standing around watching. It was only because of 1278's design that a real catastrophe was narrowly avoided, with only the crew suffering major injuries. So if they thought they were putting water in it, and they weren't, why did they think they were? Well, the issue was the Gettysburg Railroad was operating kind of fast and loose with the maintenance on its locomotives. 1278 was found to have a lot of faults that breached federal regulations. Even though both it and number 76 were inspected by the Federal Railroad Administration, the FRA, and found to be in good working order, they weren't. The half-inch movement that was described in the water glass actually is more of an indication of something wrong with it than anything. It shouldn't fluctuate that much, even on a grade. On top of that, FRA regulations said that all water glasses must be blown out and gauge cocks tested before each trip, and maintained in such a condition that they can be easily opened and closed by hand without the aid of a wrench or other tool. The maintenance on 1278 was supposed to remove scale buildup that would accumulate naturally over time. According to a steam locomotive expert, he said, "I had never seen a locomotive that had as much scale inside the water glass spindle as 1278 did." The chief mechanical officer of Strasburg Railroad speculated that with the water glass being in such a restricted condition, the spindles would be much more susceptible to being blocked by floating material or scale flake. And given the amount of scale that had built up, it would have been impossible for that much to build up between monthly boiler washings, indicating that the railroad just wasn't doing it. To make matters worse, the water glass appeared to be the only readout of the water levels in the boiler. Normally a locomotive would have different gauges indicating that water was going into the boiler, but 1278's had been removed. When this was questioned, it was discovered that some of the gauges had been there, but then broke. And when they were replaced, they broke again, so they just didn't replace them a third time. Okay, the locomotive was also not equipped with any low water alarms, which would have been another tool to help the crew realize that there was something wrong, and that you should probably fix it before you get horribly maimed. They're lucky they didn't get killed, or get others killed. And this sort of incident reflects badly on all heritage railways. Plenty of others, like Strasburg, like I mentioned, handle their steam locomotives with respect and care, and make sure they're up to standards and completely safe to operate. It's clear that the Gettysburg Railroad wasn't doing this, and it would actually be their undoing. After the accident, the railway would cease its heritage passenger operations, and it would eventually be sold to the Delaware Valley Railroad Company. From there, it actually changed hands a few more times, eventually becoming the Gettysburg and Northern Railroad. They still only do freight operations, and interchange with CSX and Norfolk Southern. As for the locomotives that were under the watch of Gettysburg Railway when they were sold, number 76 would eventually wound up at the Steam Railroading Institute in 2005 and sat in storage for several years awaiting restoration. Eventually it was sold to Oakland B&O Museum in 2017, where it did have a cosmetic restoration as B&O number 476. RS-36 number 70, the diesel that would have been pushing that day, was transferred to the Knox and Kane Railroad. Sadly, it didn't survive being in preservation, and it was scrapped in 2008. And as for 1278, the locomotive that suffered the failure, well, it was acquired at auction by a man named Jerry Jacobson in 1998, and then it sat in an Ohio Central Railroad storage facility. As of 2021, 1278 is currently inside the Age of Roundhouse Museum in Sugar Creek, Ohio, on static display. The damage to her firebox has never been repaired, and though she has been examined, and it's been found that it wouldn't take that much to restore her to safe and normal operation, there's been no takers on such a project, and she still sits peacefully in the roundhouse. And I know I've said this many times, and I'm gonna keep saying it, because I don't know why nobody listens to me. Keep water in your steam boilers! Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.